All right, guys, coming to you again, this time in a slightly disheveled state. I am nursing somewhat of a hangover, and I'm not proud of that. I'm not proud of that, but it is what it is. And I think in light of it, it's a good chance to talk about this topic of regrets and guilt. Because we all have regrets, but I think a lot of us carry guilt as well. And differentiating between the two isn't always obvious, but it's important. And I think it's a lesson that I only learnt relatively recently. Because it's okay to have regrets. For starters, it shows that you have a maturation of your thought process of what values that you hold. But having guilt, well, that's a slightly different kettle of fish. And that's not to say that you shouldn't feel guilt for a time for your bad actions either. Guilt is what prevents you from repeating them. But there's a certain point where holding on to that guilt doesn't serve any purpose. And so I guess the question is, where does that point come? Where guilt is no longer adaptive to you, where it's no longer useful. And I would say that point comes when you've at least tried to make amends for the mistake that you've made. If it's hurt somebody else, if it's hurt yourself, it doesn't really matter. But at that point where you've made a good faith attempt to repair the damage, so to speak, I think that's the point where you can let that guilt go and still hold on to that mistake as a regret, as something that informs you. And Jay-Z, I think, had a fantastic song. I think it was back on, was it like one of his first albums? I don't know. It was an album I listened to a lot when I was a teenager. And one of the closers on this track is a song called Regrets. And this song, it's very melancholic. But I sort of wondered, I haven't listened to it in a number of years, but thinking back on it now, I'm sort of not certain that that distinction was made in that song. It's almost as though you have to live with the guilt. And the truth is, it's better just to live with the regret and find a way to live with that regret so that it doesn't hold you back, so that it doesn't make you feel as though, you know, you're less of a person, you're less deserving of some kind of success or whatever it is for others to love you, whatever. But that regret informs your decision making going forward. And you're saying, I'm not going to repeat that mistake. I've grown out of it. It's a lesson I'm still trying to learn. Because I'm reaching that age now where whenever I get on the sauce with the mates, I pay for it big time for days afterwards. And part of me feels like, well, yeah, I feel kind of good in the moment. And I certainly love the yarns, the dialogue that we have, you know, that's the reason that you do it. That's why it feels good, I think. More so than the, you know, whatever minor euphoria you get out of drinking or whatever it is that you're doing. But you pay for it badly the next day. And in some ways that's good because it prevents you from doing it frequently enough. It prevents you from becoming an alcoholic. But it's still not good. And I think my hope and my dream is to be able to connect with people in a relaxed state. You know, more than just one person, but a whole bunch of people. In a state where I don't really have to do that. Where I don't feel like in order to be at my most charming or, you know, excitable or fun state for others, to maximize the good times for everybody, that I don't feel like I have to take all of that. And so that is something that perhaps I should still carry a bit of guilt for, because I have periods of change, but I haven't yet learnt the lesson. And I'm sure I'm not alone in having the experience of having gotten on the sauce and then, you know, open one's mouth to change feet, having said something dumb, having spilled the beans on something that was told in confidence, those kind of things. And, you know, you learn from them, and as you get older and a little bit wiser, hopefully, that becomes less and less to the point where you don't really do it. But there's always a threat there, and I think with things like alcohol, you're removing a layer of that inhibition. And I mean, you can't blame it on the alcohol, but it is a contributing factor. And I think in some ways it gets in the way of being a good person. That's not to say that everybody's going to fall into that same camp, but I just use it as a little illustration of my thought process regarding alcohol at this point in time. Yes, I'm sure I would fall into the category of a dull man, almost. But honestly, I'm starting to realize that life can just be simple. You don't have to constantly add all this extra stuff and all these things that people seek out in some way, whether it's implicit or explicit. It doesn't really matter. This excitement, this it's the same reason people are drawn to drama. You know, they want that emotional ping, and maybe that's not all that necessary. Maybe you can have that slower build emotion rather than the crack cocaine of emotion. You know, I'm starting to think that that's one of the ways we're really going wrong in society, is that we need our emotional content to be short and sharp. It's like if you've ever done gambling, you have the trotters, you know, the horses with the carts on the back of them, and the jockeys that sit in the back of the carts and whip the horse slightly. And then you've got the riding, which is where people ride on the horses and they go round and round the track. And then you've got the dogs, the greyhounds. And the greyhounds, it's over like that, you know. It's the most immediate thing you can get, I think, when it comes to traditional animal gambling. And I don't know quite why that's so funny. But it seems as though as a society we've been drawn to this, you know, to the dogs rather than the trots. And, you know, that's reflective, I think, in the fact that, you know, even myself, I'm sure I'm not alone. I get in headspaces where it's so much easier to just while away an hour watching random content on the internet than it is to actually sit down and read that book that I've started, even though that book gives me a lot deeper meaning. And my fear, I guess my concern, is that when I got out of my environment for a month and I got to Europe, and I was walking everywhere and seeing all these beautiful sights and interacting with people. And when I had downtime, I was reading. I wasn't spending much time looking at random content on the internet. And I have to say, I was a lot happier for it. But sometimes you come back to that environment where those neural pathways, are so ingrained, and it's so much easier to slip back into it. And so I guess what I need to figure out, and I think this is just an interesting point to bring up in general, is how do we combat that liability to slip back into old habits? Because you can't just keep changing the environment and hope that new behavior is just going to stick. At a certain point, you have to have the resiliency to be able to bring that new behavior that you had the taste of elsewhere back to your to your old environment, to your home, to the place that you spend most of your time. That's going to be the critical challenge. And I don't think I'm alone. And I need to do more research on this topic, on this area. And so there it is, a short ramble on regrets and guilt and alcohol and habits and building new ones and transplanting nascent new habits into old environments. Bit of a smorgasbord, what can I say? Okay, I'm going to call it here. I hope you guys have had a great day, or that you're going to have a great day to come, and I will talk to you soon. Okay.